Welcome back to Inside Politics here on KTN News. Now let's switch our attention to the budget. A huge chunk of the resources in the 2021-22 budget statement tabled Thursday afternoon in Parliament went to President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy projects, which he only has 13 months to implement. So how much was allocated to which projects? KTN's Duncan Haimba breaks it down for us.
When Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer, and his cohorts dreamt of the road from Cape Town to Cairo, their vision was not the road. The road was not their dream. The dream was what the road would do for them.
On 1st June, President Uhuru Kenyatta was forthright when he implored Kenyans to look at the bigger picture of his development agenda as his administration enters the home stretch. With time not on his side, 142.1 billion has been allocated to cater for the Big Four agenda, with food security getting a lion's share of 60 billion shillings, followed by the universal healthcare, which got 47.7 billion, manufacturing 20.5 billion, and affordable housing 13.9 billion to deliver 3,336 units by the end of financial year 2021-2022. Under his latest unveiled four legacy frames, economic acceleration, big push investments, restoration of dignity, and political stability, substantial resources have been set aside for their realization. Under economic acceleration, special attention has been given to what National Treasury calls post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy, whereby 8.6 billion has been allocated for enhancing liquidity in business. Environment, water and sanitation received 7.4 billion. Improving education outcomes has 6.4 billion. Agriculture and food safety at 1.7 billion. Recruitment of health interns 1.2 billion, while KWS community scouts have 1 billion. On big push investments captured as spending on key projects, SGR Phase 2 from Nairobi to Naivasha has been allocated 27.2 billion, geothermal 11.3, rural electrification 9.3 billion, Kenya Affordable Housing Project again at 8 billion, Mombasa Port Development Project will receive 7.5 billion, LAPSET 4.5, Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company 3.5, Emergency Locust Response has 1.8 billion, construction of affordable housing units an allocation of 1.2 billion, digital land registries 727.3 million, Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project will have 700 million, coal exploration and mining at 424 million, livestock production under Big Four interventions will have 156.2 million. 9.6 billion has been allocated under the Executive Office of the President to address the restoration of dignity legacy frame, with Mukuru Kwanjenga getting 1.5 billion, land, housing and development 110.4 million, construction and completion of Mathare Nyayo Korogosho Hospital 400 million, completion of construction and equipping of 5 Level 3 facilities received 205 million, while construction and equipping of 19 Level 2 and 3 health facilities has 840 million.
We remain committed to reducing the level.
However, no figure has been clearly indicated for political stability frame, which anchors the BBI. This is the last budget that President Uhuru Kenyatta will oversee its implementation, as it increasingly becomes apparent that many of the projects may not be achieved by next year, owing to time and financial constraints. Duncan Haimba, KTN News.
All right, so the so-called Uhuru Kenyatta legacy budgets, Dismas Mokua, what is your take-home from the budget statement on Thursday?
Well, it's important to note that Kenya has been running on Uhuru economics for the last 10 years. And any budget presented before the House has got the fingerprints of William Samoei Ruto and his boss, as well as the entire cabinet and members of the National Assembly. Therefore, it's unfair to simply say that this is a Uhuru budget. Every single member of the cabinet, every member of the National Assembly has got a responsibility. But when you look at this budget, you really struggle to suppress iron, because there are three things which were supposed to be addressed, and even Mura in the village can actually put together a budget proposal. Number one, the issue of public debt. It's been wished away as if it's an inconvenience. In financing this budget, they're going to borrow over 1 trillion, and 30% is going to be external debt. And then the balance is going to be domestic debt. And what this is going to do is going to deny the normal Kenyan businessman resources for business, because the bankers will obviously go for the government securities, which are very easy, which are very convenient, which are risk-free. Now, these high appetites for borrowing is a disaster for Kenya, and is one of the hallmarks of the Jubilee administration. Then secondly, they've ignored the public debt management bill, which has been proposed by the NC MP Sakwa Bunyasi, so that we have a bit of clarity and transparency into this public debt. Because majority of Kenyans do not know where this public debt goes, especially, I mean, the middle class in Kenya, or people with the slightest interest in the management of the treasury. There's a bit of a fuzzy situation that people do not know how these resources are utilized. Then the second thing, obviously, is the management of COVID. Nobody spoke about it. There was a paltry allocation to buy more vaccinations. And the third, but most important issue is about the resources in that budget that we are told year in, year out, a third of the budget goes into corruption. Now here we are talking about 1 trillion Kenyan shillings going to corruption. And you recall a few days ago, the president indicated that we lose 2 billion in a very casual manner. Then you begin to wonder, if you are the head of state and you know Mura, Wanjiko and Chebet are losing 2 billion shillings daily, and then the only thing you can tell us in a public podium is that resources are getting lost, what are we supposed to be doing?
All right.
Then my last issue is about this budgeting, which has become a mechanical process. And I know on this show, Times Above number, we have indicated we need to go back to zero-based budgeting so that accounting officers in the public sector, in fact, become accounting officers. They need to justify every coin. But what happens right now, most of these public servants just engage in incremental budgeting. The last year we had an allocation of 1 billion. Next year we want to be given 2 billion. Why can't we go back to zero-based budgeting so that there is more transparency and we cure wastage? There's a little issue of KDF coming to the management of some of the public affairs, like the Kenya Meat Commission, and recently they had a project in Kisumu. The president indicated that when he requested KDF to do these assignments, they did it with the military precision, and most of the time, they end up using up to 15% of the actual project cost. So it's a confirmation from President Kenyatta that the people who work under him in the public sector engage in mischief, engage in wastage. Now, one fails to understand why, as a president, you've admitted we are losing 2 billion shillings every day. You've admitted that the military are very efficient in managing public resources, yet you are not doing anything to cure that wastage, to cure that corruption. So in my view, those are the things that must have been captured in that budget, but they were not. So for me, it's not about Uhuru's budget, it's a Ruto budget or a Jubilee administration budget. And at the end of the day, Mura is going to be asking herself, is she better off next year, August 2022, when, after the 10 years, they would be making comparisons that when President Kibaki left office, how was my bank balance? How was my socioeconomic status? How is it 10 years later? And believe you me, even without doing any research, it's painful. When you go through that budget, it's painful, especially to sit back and reflect that up to a third of that budget is going to go to corruption hands.
All right, Javas, do you think the issues that matter to the common Mwananchi were addressed in that budget? Cost of living, the issue of taxation, the national debt, and what about the president's Big Four agenda projects?
Ben, it was a very uncommon budget presented in a very common way. And as the CS of Treasury was reading the budget, I buried my head in the hands. As I wondered about various allocations, I looked at and later on reflected on the misses and hits in that national budget for the next 1 year. And I realized that with appreciation of the good history that we have in this country, especially under the Jubilee administration, that every year, and for the past 9 years now, lots of corruption scandals that have emerged within government remain unresolved. None has been resolved. This budget did not speak to the manner in which we are going to curb wastage of public resources, even if you talked about issues of procurement mechanisms that are going to be embraced. When you look at various allocations as well, you realize that I think we still don't get it right that in Kenya we are supposed to build an industrial and agricultural-based economy. Because if at all 2/3 of business in this country is driven by the agricultural sector, and you look at the amounts of money that has been given to allocated for agriculture, then you wonder whether our focus is also appropriate. When you look at, of course, all those allocations, then you realize that, in fact, sadly so, that budget does not appreciate in its functionality the import of devolution in our constitution. Lots of those allocations, even to the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, are going to be retained by the national government. Yet, when you look at health function, when you look at agriculture function, is a function that is fully devolved and supposed to be handled by the county governments. When you look at the fact that the national executive has been given or allocated colossal amounts of money, Parliament has been given 37 billion, and when you look at how thin the allocation to the judiciary, 17 billion shillings, contrary to their initial desire to have about 24 billion shillings, then you wonder, what is it that motivates certain allocations? Yes, I know very well that this is a very important budget for President Kenyatta, especially because of his legacy focus to ensure that those projects that he had earmarked for completion during his tenure have to be finished before he exits office. But it's not actually just a question of insisting and ensuring that those projects get to be completed, because even if they don't get completed, they will be completed by his successor. Some of the projects that President Kibaki commenced, he left office before they were completed, and President Kenyatta has completed some. This budget speaks properly and satisfactorily to some quarters, but when you look at this budget through the lenses of the common mwananchi, the common citizen, then you realize that it hurts much more than it benefits the common citizen. Yes, even if roads will be constructed for the use of common citizen, it leaves, and when you examine it in its content, when you read line by line, you realize that the common citizen in this country is likely to be pained the more upon the execution of this budget than to benefit from it.
Give me your thought.
As well, when you look at the past 1 year of the COVID period, you realize that we have been recipients of billions upon billions of shillings in loans from our foreign partners. Yet, the examination, the accountability with regard to this money, the loans that have been acquired, remains non-existent. I think appreciating that accountability is one of the pillars of good governance in this country as espoused in the Constitution. Kenyans must rise to the higher ground and start demanding that every shilling of the taxpayer is accounted for by those who have got the biggest duty and responsibility to make it transparent and clearer to them.
All right. Mark Bichachi, this is the last budget whose implementation the president will oversee. Do you think the government got it right?
Our budgets are sensitive to all Kenyans, and we must appreciate that it's a difficult balancing act. Being a developing country, we need to see a lot more development infrastructure to enable Wanjiku and Mora and Nekesa to be able to enjoy the economic infrastructure needed for them to succeed. Now, this journey is not always a straightforward one, which is why we hear Kenyans ask, will we eat the roads that are being built? Now, the short answer for the short-sighted is no. But if you take a long-sighted perspective and look into the future, then the answer is definitely yes. Kenya has a 24-year deficit in infrastructure, a gap which we need to fill. So for me, I give it a big thumbs up when it comes to investing in the actual infrastructure needed to take our country to the next level. Without it, it is impossible in any economic imagination that Kenya will prosper in the years to come. The second issue, of course, is the issue of debt. Now, does Kenya need debt, and is our debt manageable? Now, it is true that consistently we have done budgets that have deficits. The reason being, with the justification has always been that we need to develop our country. But the good news for me lies here, that when we say that only 30% is foreign owned debt and 70% is local debt, then I look at it this way, that number one, those 70%, that amount of money that is being raised by Kenyan of goodwill and good intentions for this country, and they're banking on their country and putting their hard-earned cash to say, I believe in the future of the country. That is not only patriotic, but let's also remember it is an economic building activity, because those Kenyans will indeed receive a benefit and a dividend. Also, let's remember that the biggest issue with foreign debt is that it is monetized in foreign currency. Local debt is in the Kenyan shilling, and that grows our economy and also safeguards our shilling. The third issue is the issue of corruption. Now, let me remind everybody that the IMF, the World Bank, before they give any money to the country called Kenya, there must be accountability. That money must be accounted for. And if you read the report that came out of the World Bank just about a week ago concerning funds given to Kenya, you will notice what they said was good and what was said that was bad. Now, I am not in any shape, way, or form excusing the corruption that happens in this country. All I am saying is that it is not all bad news. We have the Auditor General also in place who produces reports for every single government cent spent. What we need to discuss is what does Parliament do with that report, and what we also need to discuss is what criminal liability is put for those who fail the Auditor General's report. The issue is not in accounting. The issue is in the action taken against those who are corrupt, the actions the judiciary takes on those who are corrupt. And that is how we manage that budget.
All right. Dismas, very quickly, what is your take on the fact that the CS Treasury indicated that he will be going to Parliament to ask them to raise the debt ceiling once more vis-a-vis Kenya's national debt?
That is an admission that they're going to have a challenge with the local collection. And the CS had indicated in a manner that surprised all and sundry that our economy was going to grow at 6.6%, suggesting that there's going to be more revenues, jumping from 0.6. Now, even if you've not gone to a business school, there is no way an economy is going to grow at 6.6% when you've got that heavy public debt on our shoulders, when we are going into a political year, and when political activities are going to be the order of the day. And you remember the architects of BBI had indicated that part of the reason why Kenya gets into trouble, 1 year to the elections, everything comes to a standstill and people engage in politics. Now, when you have those three factors, how is the economy going to grow at 6.6% so that we have sufficient revenues? So for him talking about the debt ceiling, that is an admission that the projections he gave are not going to be attained. That is very critical. Number two, one of the panelists has said that before we get resources from Bretton Woods institution, they insist on accountability. That is a statement of fact. But do we practice accountability? Not long ago, the president himself indicated that we lose 2 billion shillings daily.
Right.
Now, by the end of today, Morai is going to lose 2 billion. Is there somebody who is going to be held accountable tomorrow that we have lost these 2 billion? And even people within the public sector indicate that up to a third of our budget, we are talking about 1 trillion, which is going to be misappropriated by a number of public servants and politicians. Now, what kind of accountability is that? And then also when you talk about resources given maybe for low-cost housing, still one wonders whether there is any thought process, because it's not the responsibility of the government of Kenya to put up houses for morale. It's the responsibility of the government of Kenya to come up with an enabling environment so that the private sector comes up with those houses. It may surprise people to realize that up to 50% of the cost of a house in Kenya is taxation. So those are the things that the government is supposed to be addressing, not to give itself the responsibility that it's going to put up houses for. I mean, the government cannot be a property developer. You recall we have got National Housing Corporation, which is supposed to be coming up with the properties. If you go through their records, I doubt whether over the last 10 years they've come up with any property. And in my view, the people who have brought Kenya to where it is, when Kibaki left office, there were pleasure moments. But right now, everybody is paying. And in my view, the architects of our mischief cannot be the same people who come today and tell us, I'm going to solve these problems 2022.
All right. That's where we are. That was the budget, the 2021-22 budget. We'll continue to analyze and break it down for you. Let's take another quick commercial break here on the program. Don't go too far. We're back shortly, and we will be switching to Real Politics, talking about Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka 2022 game plan. They have been urged to bring the band together. Stay with us.